wonderful pleasure to welcome you all to this colloquium on the new language policy framework for public higher education in South Africa. And it's a wonderful opportunity for us to engage on something that is extraordinarily important for South Africa and for our universities. It's a colloquium that's jointly held by Universities South Africa and the University of Stellenbosch University, and particularly within University South Africa, it's the community of practice on African languages that really galvanized this this colloquium. I want to just say thank you very much to Professor Lanka Kumalo, who chairs the community of practice, and to thank him for his leadership on this. But also then to thank Professor Wim de Villiers for bringing Stellenbosch University to the table to help to host this colloquium. So without further ado, let me welcome Professor de Villiers to the podium and to ask him to kick off the proceedings for today. Wim, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ahmed, and welcome everyone to University South Africa's, or USAF's, first colloquium on the new language policy for higher education. And this event was initiated by the USAF Committee of Practice for the Teaching and Learning of African Languages, or COPAL, and it's indeed an honor for Stellenbosch University to host it. What was initially planned as a hybrid event is now fully online. And this is a scenario that we have now become accustomed to over the past year and a half. It would have been truly great to meet in person in Stellenbosch. It's a lovely, lovely spring day here in Stellenbosch. But regardless of the format, this colloquium is an opportunity for the stakeholders in the higher education sector to tackle the crucially important topics around language and multilingualism. I want to welcome all the speakers, the session chairs, delegates from the Department for Higher Education and Training, and attendees from universities across South Africa. The new language policy framework affects everyone working in this sector, and I am excited about the discussions and insights from colleagues to follow. Diversity is all around us in the higher education sector in South Africa, and it is part of our reality. It is very much evident in the number of languages students and staff speak on our campuses, and it's clear that embracing diversity and inclusivity leads to more opportunity. South Africa's diverse linguistic and cultural landscape also enables us to engage with each other through many barriers. But these barriers don't have to become insurmountable obstacles. If we can find ways to overcome them, it rather leads to collaboration and a strengthening of our networks. And such an example is the COVID-19 pandemic and how South African universities responded to this. It created, and it still creates, very unique challenges, but it has also presented opportunity. And that is how I see the next 2 days. The sector has a significant need for the key stakeholders to engage in the language policy framework and its implementation. And this will create context and shine a light on the many ways we engage with multilingualism, not just in the classroom, but also in its informal use. At Stellenbosch University, we are acutely aware of the challenges and opportunities surrounding the implementation of a language policy, how it aligns itself with a new language policy for higher education, and the fierce debate that it creates. And we welcome this debate. Again, collaboration is key. Our honest conversations can lead to solutions. And through actions like these, we can come to a deeper understanding of the value of multilingualism. And my sincere wish is that the next 2 days will be fruitful. So enjoy the colloquium. Thank you very much.
Thank you Thank you so much, Professor de Villiers. And I think we all wish that we could have been there with you in Stellenbosch. And I think that, Dr. Mabizela was just saying to me a few minutes ago, that he's really sick and tired of meeting, through these electron channels, if you like. And I think that it's really is time for us, to begin to converge sort of physically. Hopefully, once more of us are vaccinated, that will become possible. The next welcome is to be given by Professor Lanka Kumalo, who's played an absolutely wonderful role in constructing this this colloquium. And as I mentioned earlier, he chairs the USAF Community of Practice on African Languages. The Community of Practice on African Languages is a part of the Teaching and Learning Strategy Group at USAF. So it feeds directly into the kind of the deliberations of that strategy group, and therefore to the board of USAF. So with that, I'd like to welcome Professor Kumalo.
Thank you so much, Professor Bauer, for that welcome. I hope everybody can hear me quite clearly.
We can hear you.
I'm going to share my screen.
Professor Kumalo, we aren't seeing your screen yet, so.
Can you hear me, Prof. Bauer?
We can hear you, but we can't see your screen yet.
Okay, yes. I'm going to share it now.
Sure.
Can you see it now?
Yes, now we can see it. Perfect. Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you very much, Prof. Bauer. Colleagues, good afternoon. Goedemiddag, Sanmanani, Molweni, Da, Avusheni, Dumelang. It's a South African good afternoon. It is such an honor to welcome the esteemed delegates to this very important colloquium. And I am glad that we meet today to address this national imperative. The new language policy framework for public higher education has brought the language issue sharply to the fore, even more so when some of our higher education language policies are being contested in our court of law. But I want to highlight what the new framework seeks to achieve. It seeks to promote and strengthen the use of all official languages across all functional domains of public higher education, including scholarship, teaching and learning, as well as wider communication in line with Section 20 of our Constitution. This is vitally important because for the first time, our frameworks are emphasizing discourses in these domains of scholarship, teaching and learning. And I think the policy provides a workable and excellent framework for all the higher education institutions to develop responsive institutional language policies in order for these policies to enable real transformation to take place. This should be a result that this should result in improved epistemic access and student success, which hitherto has been the bane of higher education institutions in this country. The colloquium therefore seeks to unpack the critical provisions of the new framework to scope an implementation strategy that is effective in its implementation to identify resources that are required to deploy for the successful implementation of this new framework, and to move the discourse on language, however uncomfortable, from the periphery to the center of the academy. And finally, to embrace multilingualism in the academy for its obvious potential and translational impact, that is epistemic access, student success, social cohesion, curriculum transformation, and indeed decolonialism. COPAL, therefore, is a community of practice that has driven this effort, and it is a community of practice that is formed as a governance structure of the University of South Africa. It works closely with and reports to the Teaching and Learning Strategy Group that is chaired by Vice Chancellor Dr. Sizwe Mabizela, and its mandate is to promote and strengthen the teaching and learning of African languages in public universities in South Africa. So COPAL members therefore provide leadership in language policy matters and indeed in formulating implementation strategies at national and institutional level. This colloquium therefore will profit from their views on language policy, on implementation strategies, and transformation that is undergirded and enabled through language. It is my sincere hope, therefore, colleagues, that we will have an enlightened discussions today and tomorrow, that we will be courageous enough to make bold decisions, and that all South African languages can be active vehicles of knowledge acquisition, knowledge production, and knowledge exchange. I want to thank you, and I'm hoping that we will indeed come up with giant steps towards developing a strategy that is going to enhance the use and function of all South African languages in the academy. I thank you very much, colleagues.
Thank you so much, Professor Kumalo, for those introductory words. And I think that you've laid out the challenge that we are to face, I think, over the next day and a half or so. And it seems to me, at least, that what we have to achieve over the next day and a half is indeed kind of a plan, if you like, for the sector on addressing the challenges that are laid out in that policy plan. We'll hear much more about the policy as we go into as we head into the next sessions, if you like. It seems to me, at least, that one of the major challenges for us as a sector is, in fact, to try and understand the relationship between this issue around the language, the use of multilingual approaches to higher education, and the place of our universities in our society. And I remember sort of conversations going back several years now, not several years, sort of decades, on this particular issue. Conversations with Neville Alexander, Kwesi Pra, and a range of others, sort of even in the 90s, sort of addressing this issue and bringing to the fore the challenge we face as a university sector. And I think that the 3 or 4 kind of key issues that we have to pay attention to are actually reported on in the Act and in the document, at least in the bill that was kind of published, or in the regulation that was published. And I'll come to those in a second. But I wanted to raise 2 major issues at this point. The one is just the importance of our university, the importance placed on by our universities on issues around social justice. And what I want to focus in on here is to say that addressing the issue of the use of African languages at our universities is indeed a social justice issue. It's tied in very much with addressing the very significant imbalances that exist in our system, exist in South Africa in terms of the language usage and so on. And of course, that is tied to issues around access and success and so on, and not just access and success in terms of admissions to university and success through university studies and so on, but also to other spheres of public life, if you like. So, and universities being at the heart of South Africa's kind of knowledge enterprise, if you like, has to pay attention to the development of our African languages as languages of academic discourse, and to try and ensure that when we engage in academic discourse, that it's not something that allows certain people to participate in and others not, if you like. So, so there's a whole social justice agenda, if you like, which is critically important. The second, of course, is just this very real detail, which is that unless we are constantly working at building the capacity of our African languages to be used in technical language, in academic language, in literary language, and so on, they will die a slow death, like, because they have to keep up, if you like, with the large changes that are taking place in our society, not just our society, but in global society. So there's a very serious responsibility that rests on the universities to try and ensure that these languages, these official languages in our country and other languages, that they are all engaged in processes of evolution, processes of development, processes of engagement, and so on, and that this is tied very much to challenging the dominance of one or two languages in South Africa. But there's a third issue which really interests me, and I think it's a very important issue, and that is that we are a nation that has within it a number of knowledge systems which coexist with each other, which cohabitate our lives, if you like. And those knowledge systems are, of course, very tied to languages that are not the dominant languages in our universities. And so if we are to kind of really turn the attention of our universities to understanding the role of our universities in contemporary South Africa, it's absolutely critical that the opportunity and the space, if you like, for the intersections and the engagements between those knowledge systems can take place in this multilingual, multimodal kind of fashion, if you like, because otherwise a lot is lost, if you like. Many of those knowledge systems are infinitely kind of interwoven with the languages that are spoken in our country, and therefore the need for us to try and ensure that if we are to deal with the intersection, deal with knowledge production at the intersection of these different knowledge systems, that we ensure the development of all of our languages. And that speaks directly, of course, to the research enterprise of our universities. And then, there's one last point, and that is that at all times, it seems to me that we have to be careful that we don't balkanize our universities, that we do adopt a multilingual approach, that we don't end up with universities that serve just one language group and nothing else. And so the idea of really opening up the use of languages rather than closing down the universities by kind of, by having just a single language kind of operating at it. This policy framework that has been put together is really flows out of the review of the language policy for higher education in 2002, which was really driven by the need to promote multilingualism in institutional policies and functions. And when I think about it, our universities have made some progress in that direction, but not all the progress. And because there was a need to kind of revisit this, a ministerial advisory panel on African languages was set up, and which in 2012, and which worked until 2015, and it called for a review of that policy. And this current new policy framework really flows out of that. And of course, it raises a whole range of interesting challenges, if you like, for our universities. For instance, it really speaks about the need for us to interrogate the role of all of our languages in teaching and learning. It speaks to the language of official communication at the higher education institutions. It speaks to the role of higher education in promoting and creating conditions for access and success. It addresses the issues of second curriculum, what's happening outside of the classroom, and opening up the way for students to engage in multiple language in that second curriculum, and so on. So a range of really important interventions that are expected of our universities. What should we expect out of this colloquium? Well, first of all, as Professor de Villiers indicates, and Professor Kumalo indicated, this provides us with an opportunity to have a frank discussion about where we should be going with this new language policy framework, and to try and understand the extent to which we've made progress and haven't made progress, and what needs to be now kind of pulled together. I'm hoping very much that what this colloquium will also do is provide us with an agenda for COPAL, the Community of Practice on African Languages, and for each institution to begin this enterprise of developing new approaches to addressing the development of African languages. And of course, at the heart of that is this really major challenge, of developing teachers of African languages, something which we don't pay enough attention to, it seems to me. So, from my point of view, this colloquium should really be a kind of an opportunity for us to shape an agenda for the next 5 years, over the next 10 years. One of the things that's covered in the review document, in the review document that I spoke about earlier, is the need for funding, if you like, for the languages project. And it seems to me that that's something that we will have to engage the Department of Higher Education and Training on, and hopefully we'll hear about some of that later today. So it seems to me, at least, that we have to think of this project of understanding how the African languages are kind of taken up by our universities. We have to think of it as a project that really lays out an opportunity for us to think about the post-colonial futures for universities in South Africa and for South Africa itself. In some respects, I think we have to come to grips with the idea that if our languages do not succeed in becoming modern languages that are fully kind of ensconced in academic discourse and so on, that they will forever be kind of second-class languages. We have to kind of elevate them so that they become languages which are on par with the other dominant languages in the world. So with that, with those few words, it gives me great pleasure today to welcome to the podium to give us a keynote address Dr. Sizwe Mabizela, who's the Vice Chancellor at Rhodes University. As has been mentioned by Professor Kumalo, he's the chairperson of the Teaching and Learning Strategy Group at USAF. He's somebody who's spoken passionately about the use of language, the use of African languages in teaching and learning. In fact, it was his initiative that brought the community of practice into being, and also somebody who's a mathematician who understands fully the complexity, if you like, of bringing the African languages to bear on the teaching and learning of the sciences and mathematics and the social sciences and so on. So somebody that I have deep respect for, and somebody who is really an outstanding leader in our sector. With that, let me welcome Sizwe Mabizela onto the podium.
Thank you very much, Professor Bawa, our session chair, Vice Chancellor of Stellenbosch University, Professor Wim de Villiers, Chair of the Community of Practice on the Teaching and Learning of African Languages, Professor Kumalo, and other members of COPAL, fellow Vice Chancellors, and esteemed guests. Good afternoon. Habari za mchana, wataja, khotsong, molweni, bonjour, sanbonani, dumelang, goeienaarmiddag. Thank you for the opportunity to make some brief comments on the role of language to transform our higher education institutions. There are two strategic documents which form a backdrop and a point of departure to the comments that I'll make. The first is our national constitution, which is Act 108 of 1996, which declares in its preamble our commitment as a nation to, among other things, heal the divisions of the past and establish a society based on democratic values, social justice, and fundamental human rights. Commit ourselves to improve the quality of life of all citizens and free the potential of each person. I do want to underline that part of freeing the potential of each person. As one of its founding provisions, our Constitution declares unequivocally that the official languages of the Republic are Sepedi, Sesotho, Setswana, Seswati, Tshivenda, Xitsonga, Afrikaans, English, isiNdebele, isiXhosa, and isiZulu. The Constitution further recognizes the historically diminished use and status of indigenous languages of our people, and it enjoins the state to take practical and positive measures to elevate the status and advance the use of these languages. The Constitution further demands that all official languages must enjoy parity of esteem and must be treated equitably. Despite being recognized in the Constitution as official languages, indigenous African languages remain undervalued. They remain underdeveloped. The second important policy document which frames my input this afternoon is the Education White Paper 3, a program for the transformation of higher education. This document envisions a transformed, democratic, non-racial, and non-sexist system of higher education that will, among other things, promote equity of access and fair chances of success to all who seek to realize their potential through higher education. Remember, the Constitution commits us to freeing the potential. And so the white paper says we must create opportunities for access and success for all those who want to realize their potential through higher education, while at the same time eradicating all forms of unfair discrimination and advancing redress for the past inequalities. Commits to contribute to the advancement of all forms of knowledge and scholarship, and in particular, address the diverse problems and demands of the local, national, regional, and continental contexts, and uphold rigorous standards of academic quality. And I really want to underline this because we must at all times uphold rigorous standards of academic quality. Now, underpinning the vision of a transformed, democratic, non-racial and non-sexist higher education system are key principles, one of which is equity and redress, which demands of higher education institutions to identify and remove all barriers to access and success in higher education, and to implement measures of empowerment to bring about equal opportunity for individuals and institutions. So equity of access must be complemented by a concern for equity of outcomes. The white paper acknowledges that South Africa's rich language inheritance offers many opportunities, but it also poses a number of challenges to our higher education sector. Appreciating the role of language in the realization of the transformation imperatives of our higher education system and the realization of the kind of a society our Constitution envisions is of paramount importance. Now, the new language policy framework for higher education seeks to give substance and effect to the imperatives of our Constitution and the transformation agenda of our higher education system. The white paper unequivocally acknowledges the role of higher education in promoting and creating conditions for the development of all South African languages, including the official languages, the Khoi, Nama, and San languages, and sign language, and in elevating the status and advancing the use of the indigenous languages of our people. Now, higher education institutions have a vital role to play in promoting multilingualism as a strategy to advance inclusion and to forge common nationhood. Speaking another language opens up possibilities of engagement with other communities at a much deeper level. And as we all must acknowledge, language is more than just a means of communication. It carries with it the culture, the traditions, thought systems, beliefs, norms, values, practices, and a whole lot more. As President Mandela notes in his book, Long Walk to Freedom, I quote, "Without language, one cannot talk to people and understand them. One cannot share their hopes and aspirations. One cannot grasp their history, appreciate their poetry, and savor their songs." So the ability to speak another person's language endears you to that person. And this is precisely what President Mandela meant when he says, if you talk to a person in a language they understand, that goes to their heart, to their head, and if you talk to them in their language, that goes to their heart. And that is really important. Of course, I have adapted the use of pronouns there so that because it was originally formulated in the masculine. I think it is important that we endeavor to deal with the issues of language also in that sense, to be inclusive. It is one of the sad realities of our sorry past that the apartheid project did not only separate people of this country along racial lines, but also along ethnic lines, with language used as a marker of ethnicity. The use of our rich linguistic diversity to advance the grand apartheid experiment of separate development and entrench divisions among the people of this country was undoubtedly the most cruel thing to be done by the apartheid system. Now, these divisions have sadly persisted beyond the lifespan of the apartheid system. We must heal the divisions of the past and forge a new sense of nationhood and a new sense of national identity. That is what this framework seeks to do. Now, the role of language in the teaching and learning enterprise can never be overemphasized. As we all know, language can be a powerful tool for inclusion and exclusion. It can effectively serve as a doorway leading to opportunities and the fulfillment of one's potential. But it can also serve as a gatekeeper to block and frustrate one's opportunities in life. As the white paper and the new language policy framework suggest, it is an important role of higher education institutions to promote multilingualism in order to facilitate meaningful access and participation by all university communities in all university activities. We must all agree that language should not be a barrier, but must serve to facilitate access and success in education. It must serve to advance equity and inclusivity and promote social cohesion and nation building. Access to different languages is akin to having different lenses through which you can perceive the world in different ways, each lens having a different take which enhances the overall perspective. Indeed, use of different languages provides one with different perspectives, and it provides one with different angles to the same issue or the same idea. Now, this is a critical aspect of knowledge creation and meaning making. So harnessing the opportunities created by the development and use of our diverse languages can greatly enhance our intellectual endeavor. We must all be aware that language-laden disciplines pose a particular challenge for a second or third language speaker of English to articulate their thoughts with the necessary confidence, rigor, clarity, depth, and precision that they would have been able to in their indigenous language. Now, we all have an important role to play in the nurturing of an environment in which multilingualism is not seen as a problem, but as a resource to facilitate cognitive development, epistemic access, inclusiveness, transformation, social cohesion, and respect for all languages. Arguments are constantly made that indigenous languages are not adequately developed to the level that they can be used in higher education institutions. It is the responsibility of higher education institutions as part of their transformation and decolonization agenda to develop and intellectualize these languages. They have to develop appropriate terminologies, appropriate phrases, and relevant disciplinary discourses so that the indigenous languages can serve as academic and scientific languages. As the policy notes, the challenge facing higher education is to ensure the simultaneous development of a multilingual environment in which all our languages are developed as academic and scientific languages, while at the same time ensuring that the existing languages of instruction do not serve as a barrier to access and success. Universities have a critical role to play in elevating the status of our indigenous languages and engendering a sense of pride in our linguistic diversity as a source of our intellectual vitality. We must, however, never underestimate the enormity of the task at hand, nor the complexities of researching and developing these indigenous languages into scientific and academic languages. It will require resources, and it will demand a resolute political will. It will demand commitment and partnerships at every level. Universities, DHET, DBE, Pan South African Language Board, and other stakeholders in our society. It will demand of our universities to provide support to language departments so that they can thrive, so that they can flourish. The higher education system will have to produce sufficient language teachers who will be competent and fluent in indigenous languages. As we all know, the language policy, which was promulgated in 2002, has never had much success. And there are reasons for that failure. By all means, these will have to be adequately addressed if the implementation of the new policy framework is to succeed. All said, we should not suggest that language and language alone is all it will take to facilitate access and success in higher education. More fundamentally, academic literacy is a sine qua non for success in higher education. We must pay attention to academic literacy. Chair, as I conclude, I wish to thank and commend the leadership and members of the Committee of Practice on the Teaching and Learning of African Languages, COPA, for their sterling work. The sterling work they are doing to promote and drive the use of indigenous African languages in our higher education institutions. It is in sharing good practice and experience, networking, collaborating and cooperating on common initiatives, and devising collective solutions to common concerns and challenges that we all can learn from and through one another and advance the common objective of improving the prospects of access and success in our institutions of higher learning. On behalf of Yusuf, I also wish to thank Stellenbosch University for hosting this important colloquium. The Constitution requires of us to heal the divisions of the past and build a better nation. and ensuring that languages, particularly indigenous languages, are accorded the esteem that they deserve, that they are developed, and that they are valued, will go a long way in helping us achieve this. Asante sana, zikomo kwambiri, ndatenda. Thank you very much. Inkom, inkosi, bolsha spasiba, gialibocha, ngiyabonga, vielen Dank, merci beaucoup, dolibuwa ngamanda, gialibuwa, shukran, tante gratia, ngiyathokoza, baya danke, obrigado.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Mavizela. And I think that you've raised all of the key issues, it seems to me. And I want to thank you for linking this really important project for universities with the political project of creating the new nation. I think, and I know that we're 27 years down the line, but we still have a lot of work to do. And the universities are and should be right at the center of that project. And the fact of the matter is that really, at the heart of that project is the project of languages, I think. So thank you so much for that. And I think that your invocation, for us to think about this as part of the healing project of South Africa is a critical one. And thank you so much. Colleagues, it seems to me that we have something like 10 minutes before we go on to the next session. And I wanted to suggest that we have just a 10-minute break, if you like, before I hand over to the chair for the next session. Let's aim to be back here at about 10 to 2. Thank you so much.